happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And we start off with some bad news. An anti-LGBT legal group has scored a win in Arizona, and it has forced New York City to repeal a law banning conversion therapy for adults.
There are silver linings to both these stories.
Well.
They're a little more complex, but we'll talk about that.
Okay.
We'll also talk about the last Democratic presidential debate and Pete Buttigieg's big gay moment.
LGBT themes continue to dominate the list of the most banned books in the United States.
Grim news in reports from Uzbekistan and Chechnya.
But there was a gay breakthrough in, wait for it, Rwanda.
Shockingly, actually.
Well, tough stuff, anyway.
Very, and we'll see where that goes, but
Yeah.
Shocking story. And a UK sports star has come out about having HIV.
And Saturday Night Live welcomed a gay Asian player for the first time, but it dumped an anti-gay, anti-Asian one.
I suspect that was a good decision, but we can discuss that. Someone asked me what I thought of it. I said, "Are you kidding? Do you know me?" All right. Well, we do know the Alliance Defending Freedom. We talk about them on an almost weekly basis.
Big anti-LGBT legal group. Very busy.
They will take any opportunity shamelessly to come after us everywhere across the country.
And I've thought about this. I mean, one of the reasons they're so aggressive is that they're losing the culture war, and they know it. And they're trying to, it's sort of a rear guard action to try to claw back some stuff, but the culture just keeps, leaving them, and they're losing young people. I mean, I'm trying to put a positive, not a positive spin on these things.
I think there is some truth to that, but first of all, you may remember who our president is and what's happening in the country.
They own the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
yes,
and they own the Senate, and they own the horrors that are happening in the country at the moment and may continue in the country for a while. So I wouldn't be so sure that they're completely losing everything.
No. I'm talking about the culture war that they're losing. People have moved on.
Well, you can say that, but meanwhile, things are going to hell in a handbasket.
When we talk about cases like this, the Arizona case, it's a case of somebody who did inscriptions for weddings, invitations.
The Brush and Nib Company, run by two attractive young women who could easily be a couple. But nonetheless, they run this company, and they're very Christian. And
they say.
They say. But here's the really interesting thing. There are no plaintiffs in this case. There is no case. There is no same-sex couple that came to them for wedding invitations.
It's sort of like the Bush Doctrine, a preemptive strike.
But courts don't usually entertain things like that, and that is a little shocking to me that any court would accept this case. And
it had been, and I'm not trying to make a pun, brushed aside by the lower courts and said, no, we're not upholding you. This, bring somebody. But anyway, they essentially have won the future right, if gays or lesbians come along and want to get married, not to create something for them on First Amendment grounds. So the court specifically said, and it was, I believe, a
4-3 decision by the Arizona Supreme Court.
Said, we're not striking down the LGBT rights ordinance.
Because, in fact, Phoenix, where this case is located, has a non-discrimination law that covers sexual orientation and gender identity.
What it says is that this one company could refuse to make this one type of product for same-sex couples. In other words, if they come in and they just want to buy a box of cards that's been pre-printed and you discriminate against them because they're gay, that's not okay.
Well, this is the question we've seen raised for years now, and we keep picking apart these questions of, can a T-shirt printing company refuse to print T-shirts with a pro-LGBTQ slogan? Where do you draw the line for companies that are supposedly involved in some kind of expressive work?
Right.
Do they, cake bakers, you can be forced to bake a cake, but can you be forced to write something in particular on it that the couple wants?
I worry that almost anybody providing a service can say there's a level of creativity in what I do.
Yes.
And we're a catering company, or I'm your waiter, but I don't want to help you celebrate your gay anniversary.
And then we're right back to Lester Maddox with the axe handles throwing black people out of his restaurant in Georgia. Right. It is ludicrous.
On religious grounds.
It is ludicrous. Yes, a lot of racial discrimination was justified on religious grounds. And readings of the Bible, supposedly. But this is just ludicrous that religion is allowed to intrude into the public commerce sphere, and people can make these distinctions.
But what I meant about them being so active and people giving them a lot of money and doing all this, and what's it going to take for us? Now, we have active legal groups and things, and they're all getting afraid of the courts because of the way they're stacked. But I think it's probably going to take like absolutely losing abortion rights, like Roe v. Wade, or repeal of same-sex marriage by the court, something like that will because all this was on the line in the last election. And people didn't pay attention.
Exactly, and I only hope that a loss that big would force a way to change it. But we're talking about the court system here, that the conservatives are stacking and are taking power in, and that's very bad because it's not subject to electoral correction.
That's
and
not
you
true.
Also, well, ultimately, but what? Because we can impeach them?
No, because you can, and I'm serious. I've said it, I say this repeatedly, it probably bores people, but, your ancestor wrote the Judiciary Act of the United States. It sets the number of judges on all the courts, and they amend it constantly because we need more federal judges in the local, in this district, that district. Oh, we got a new state, we got to send some out there. But it also means they can change the number on the Supreme Court. And if people don't start seriously talking about this, given how aggressive the Republicans have been, if we're not as equally aggressive, then we're just giving up.
Well, exactly, but this all requires some kind of power in the legislature.
You need to have the House, the Senate, and the presidency.
Yeah,
then you also
good luck with that.
And you have to get rid of the filibuster, and then you just change the law. Honestly.
There you go. There's your agenda.
It is that simple. And if we don't talk about it that way and we say, we'll start wringing our hands, they're rolling over us like like a bulldozer.
They are.
And we're saying, let's go back to norms. Take power.
P.S. The conventional wisdom has been for decades that the reason the Alliance Defending Freedom and previous manifestations of the right wing like this are doing this so aggressively is to raise money. It has a lot less to do with ideology than it has to do with staying in business and staying in power, and that's why they went after abortion in the first place. And when that started to lose for them, they started coming after us because that was a way for them to use scare tactics to raise money.
Just when the television news networks are losing interest in us and our issues. There was a story about that this week.
Anyway, so the idea is that in this Arizona case, the court supposedly wrote a very narrow opinion, but as we know, this is really a foot in the door for companies and individuals all over the country. This all goes back to the Hobby Lobby case, too, to make these kinds of arguments and just throw the door open to doing whatever they want and turning this into a theocracy.
And I'm not trying to be Pollyanna, but we saw this happen in Mississippi where they have a horrible law that says you can do this, right?
Yeah.
But how did businesses react there? They put stickers in their windows saying, y'all welcome here. Everyone, y'all means y'all. Everybody's welcome. And when the New York Times went down and interviewed all the businesses in Jackson or wherever they were, they all said, no, we don't want to discriminate. We want people's money. So that is the vast majority of places.
That's true. I buy that. I like that silver lining.
Well, what about the city council?
New York City Council, a year ago, 2 years ago, passed a law outlawing conversion therapy. Most places pass these laws and say no conversion therapy for minors in a commercial setting.
We have to protect children from conversion therapy.
From doctors who claim to be able to change people's sexual orientation or gender identity.
This doesn't mean your priest or rabbi can't still try to do this to you, but if they're going to be professional counselors who are seeking reimbursement under Medicaid and things or whatever, they can't.
So the New York City Council went beyond that and said, we're going to include adults in this law, too. And did they also include religious manifestations, or was it?
I'm not 100% sure.
At any rate, they wrote a much more expansive law than most places have. So our friends at the Alliance Defending Freedom have come after this law in New York and said it's overbroad. It violates counselors' rights to free speech, especially because it covers adults, and thus panic ensues at the New York City Council. We cannot withstand this lawsuit, and what if they win the lawsuit? And that ruins our point of view across the board.
So Corey Johnson, the out-gay Speaker of the Council, said, this was an agonizing decision, but all the gay legal groups told me I should do this because we don't want to set a bad precedent on this. Now, so
the decision is we're going to repeal this law, so it is not something that the ADF can hook into to ruin us across the country.
Now, they say New York state law covers this, but it only covers it for
minors,
kids.
Yeah.
And the other thing they say is what happened in New Jersey. We can still use consumer protection laws, anti-fraud laws. If you're an adult who has been hurt by this, it's consumer fraud, and somebody won this way in New Jersey, and they could do that in New York.
So it seemed like something that would be controversial to repeal this law, but in fact, they have marshaled their ducks in a row. That was not the right phrase.
Well,
and all the LGBTQ legal groups, politicians, everybody else is on board with the idea that repealing this law in New York City is the right thing to do.
When Christine Quinn was the Speaker of the Council, out lesbian, she passed a number of bills that Bloomberg was going to go after legally, and he vetoed them.
Yeah.
And they did not override his vetoes because they were afraid of losing the legal cases and setting more bad precedents. Meanwhile, the D.C. Council is looking about banning the LGBTQ panic defense. Now, James Essex, our friend at the ACLU, to give you a little bit more of a bright side, said taxpayers have had to pay out over $2 million for discriminating against us in Kentucky, Wisconsin, and Iowa alone this year. So we are winning some cases.
Still. And back to Arizona, the dissents by the 3 judges on the Supreme Court who dissented against that ruling of the brush and nib marriage invitation case were enormously eloquent about how horrible this decision was and how the company was not entitled to this kind of exemption from the non-discrimination law.
I don't imagine we'll be appealing this to the Supreme Court. Or a federal court?
Probably not, but who knows? It takes a while. Maybe if we do it now, by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, we'll have a different looking Supreme Court.
Okay.
One can hope.
Shall we talk about the Democratic debate?
Sure.
From last week, which we're unable to talk about last week. Pete Buttigieg, who I call the middle child in the field, who tries to calm everybody down when they fight too much.
And be very, smart.
He is a smart guy.
He is.
But he also had his big gay moment, because when they asked you what's your biggest professional challenge, he talked about coming out. And when he was already mayor of South Bend and he came out, and he got reelected with 80% of the vote.
And he talked about how tough it had been for him to be closeted in the military in Afghanistan, so that when he came back and he was in office, and he finally decided he didn't want to live that way anymore.
So whatever happens with his candidacy, at least for getting gay, he's getting gay stuff out there.
He got a lot of applause for that.
Getting gay stuff out there.
And this Friday, for those of you who are seeing this in time, is the big LGBTQ presidential forum at Coe College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And that will be sequential interviews with at least 10 of the Democratic candidates, all the major ones except Bernie Sanders, who has not agreed to participate in this. But you can watch it online. It is co-sponsored by GLAAD and One Iowa, which is the statewide group there, and a bunch of others. And you can find it on YouTube. You can probably find it at the GLAAD.org website. And the Gazette.com, the local newspaper there, is also going to be carrying it. That's this Friday, the 20th, at 8 p.m. Eastern.
But a little more on the debate we just had. I mean, first of all, I thought Kamala Harris started out with her attack on Trump. I thought that was very effective. And she went down 8% in the polls. But I want to say, and there are other things these candidates do that are good, but I'm tired of people like Klobuchar and Biden and others, and George Stephanopoulos, the moderator, using Republican talking points and telling Bernie and Warren, you're going to throw 149 million people off health care insurance. Well, and they keep repeating it, and it is just, they're going to, I mean,
yes.
Trump's ads are made by these people.
But I blame Bernie and Elizabeth, too, for not adequately explaining that that Medicare for All is going to improve people's pocketbooks and health outcomes.
They try to talk about it. You're right. They don't do a good enough job on it.
They don't.
Bernie just yells, I wrote the God.
They don't tell people you are already paying more than you should for this. It is not that you will be taxed in some way that is going to explode your budget. You will be paying less in the end, and because the insurance companies will be cut out of it. And why do you think they're doing you some big favor, the insurance companies?
Elizabeth Warren did say that. People love their doctors and nurses. They don't love their insurance companies.
Well, they're defending their insurance companies, or the more centrist candidates are, and not explaining to people.
I'm on Medicare now, and I talked to a doctor. He said there are all these old people who come in, and he says, this is the Upper East Side of New York, he says, and they're rich. They wait until they get Medicare.
Yes.
These are rich people.
Yes.
Because then it's going to be much more affordable.
Yes. And it would be more affordable for the whole country.
Well, Elizabeth has shot up to 25% in the polls. She had that huge rally here downtown in New York in Washington Square. 20,000 people, biggest of the campaign. And I'm astounded that she stood there for 4 hours afterwards having people take pictures with her.
Very smart marketing.
60,000 have done that since. And of course, all these pictures are going to end up on Facebook and social media and Instagram. And it's just free advertising.
You don't even need a social media team, because all these people who stood in line and got these pictures are spreading them for you.
And Joe Biden still leads with 31% of the vote. Okay.
I don't think that's a solid lead.
Well, the enthusiasm factor is more with Bernie and Warren.
Yes.
This time. We're not settling this race. We don't have a candidate. We just let it play out.
Exactly. Now, shall we move on to he whose name shall not be mentioned?
Sure. Well,
all right. Well, first of all,
he said we're locked and loaded for war with Iran.
Oh, please. He's all bluff and all bluster.
Defended his friend Brett Kavanaugh this week.
Yeah. Except for when he's getting rid of all the Obama good regulations. This coming Monday, September 23rd, there will be an anti-Trump march here in New York in the evening, preceding his speech the next day at the United Nations General Assembly, which should be
these demonstrators are meeting at Bryant Park at 5:30, and they think they're going down to Washington Square, but we're going to try to lead them elsewhere.
Yeah, we have a different idea. Let's see whether we can hijack this march and take it to a more
Trumpian location.
Yes, exactly. That's our idea.
The Manhattan DA has finally gone after him and asked for 8 years of taxes in the Stormy Daniels case.
And I saw a screening of a movie that's being released this weekend in New York and next weekend in L.A. Is it next weekend in L.A. for that? Well, this weekend in New York at least. Where's My Roy Cohn? Which, of course, is the Trump quote. And a lot of it...
Roy Cohn was his lawyer.
His mentor.
And mentor, who taught him to be as mean as he is.
And to lie and to never apologize and never admit any wrongdoing. And a lot of that is detailed in this movie. And there is
well, I'm telling people, Roy Cohn was the lawyer who, when he was young, worked with Joe McCarthy of McCarthyism.
Roy Cohn, closeted gay. Joe McCarthy, closeted gay. David Shine, the army guy that
Cardinal
Cohn was
Spellman,
working
closeted
with.
gay. They all worked together.
All of them. And
terrible. The closet is a terrible place.
And so it's made by Matt Tyrnauer, who also made Scotty and the Secret History of Hollywood that we've talked to you about here, and the Valentino biopic. It's not the greatest movie ever made, but there is an incredible smorgasbord of film of Roy Cohn. If you'd have any curiosity about him. And there's Liz Smith, and there's...
But Barbara Walters, who used to date him.
It's all about Barbara Walters and how she defended him.
My friend Herb Cohen was friends with Barbara, and he called her once, and in the background she's going, "Roy, stop that! No!" Barbara Walters. Oh,
Where's My Roy Cohn is the movie.
Worst person in the world.
Barbara
and
or
reminds
Roy?
me of Corey Lewandowski in some ways.
Worse.
Because I remember him being like on Ted Koppel, and this is 100 years after the fall of... He's still condemning communism.
He just lied about everything. He really did teach Trump how to act.
Well, one person that Trump has a soft spot for is Elton John, and he is very upset, and he's never gotten over Elton John not coming to his inauguration.
Mika Brzezinski had the best line about that. Why Elton didn't go?
Why?
Not a big enough crowd.
But Elton John did perform at his third wedding, which the Clintons attended back then with Melania.
Did he perform at Rush Limbaugh's wedding too?
I think for pay, but it's still outrageous.
So what?
Oh, it's outrageous.
Yeah, terrible.
Elton's a funny guy, but he's raised a lot of money for AIDS.
Yes.
And I was very disappointed in Eric Holder this week, the former Attorney General, cautioning against prosecuting Trump post-presidency. Yeah, your administration didn't go after Bush, who did this illegal war with Cheney and Rumsfeld and totally destroyed the Middle East.
What's his argument against prosecuting him post-presidency?
We have to watch out for things. We know what it is? It's people in power not wanting to be subject to penalty.
It is the self-perpetuating hierarchy.
There you are.
All right. Well, New York.
But the president did. Well, come on. This is gay AIDS news. President did say he was going to end AIDS this year, and we know how to do it now. He said.
The lies and bluffs this guy tells on a minute-by-minute basis.
Well, if you're talking about treachery, what those Republicans did in North Carolina this week, they waited till the 9/11 ceremonies, and they said they weren't going to do any work that day, and the Democrats were all at the 9/11 ceremonies in North Carolina, and they all came to the legislature and overrode the governor's veto on the budget bill. It is so scummy.
It's Lucy with a football.
Scummy.
And we fall for it. New York State Comptroller Napoli has asked 41 corporations to rethink their giving to right-wing politicians. And the reason that's important is because he holds a lot of stock in those companies.
It's the Zero for Zeros campaign, which is going on now, which is saying to groups like HRC, don't be so cozy with these companies that are electing the people that are killing us. Now, Scott Stringer, the city comptroller, was asked. His office was asked about this, and they said, no, we're not doing that. The guy who gave that quote out has been demoted. Scott got a hold of it and said, oh, yes, we are. You're not going to outflank me. I'm running for mayor.
And Trump, this week's edition of Horrible Trump Nominees, the longtime anti-LGBTQ Robert Destro has been nominated for a State Department post, Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor.
It's just...
a bigot for human rights.
Well, that's true in a lot of departments.
And a second same-sex couple is suing the State Department to recognize the citizenship of their child born to a surrogate in Canada. But the State Department won't recognize the marriage of this couple so that their child would be given citizenship. It's they just flaunt the law.
Okay.
They do.
You may have heard of this presidential candidate named Bill de Blasio, but he did appoint our pal.
Maybe you've heard of him.
He did appoint our pal, Jillian Weiss, to the City Commission on Gender Equality. She's a longtime transgender activist and attorney.
That's a nice thing. And let's see.
Politics? Well, where are we in this? Where are we on our list here?
Well, we're still up here, so
right.
maybe we should move on to
Get to some
that.
of the bad news. Okay.
In Kansas.
Yeah.
Very sad story. Yet another black trans woman, this one Jaliyah Jamar, 20 years old,
Right.
shot dead. She is the 19th trans person recorded as murdered this year in the United States, 18 of them black trans women.
And I told you about the Abel Cedeno being sentenced to 14 years in that classroom fight, bullied gay teen and everything. But now there are 3 lawsuits that are going to look at bullying in high schools, and it's going to put it all in a spotlight.
In Iowa, in the town of Sioux Center, conservatives complaining have driven a pride brunch from a restaurant there, although it's moving to a bigger version of the same restaurant in a nearby town, Lamar's, the Four Brothers restaurant. But these people just stood up and said, we don't want this event held at this restaurant. Evidently, businesses can be mean to us, but if they're nice to us, then the conservative populace gets upset.
All right. In Indiana, we've got an out gay guy, a tech CEO, Josh Owen, 34 years old. We have a picture of him, who's seeking the Democratic nomination for governor. He's never held office, and there's never been a statewide gay candidate. He's supporting issues such as marijuana legislation, LGBT rights, and universal background checks for gun purchases. The other declared Democrat in the race is former New York City Health Commissioner and Indiana Commissioner Woody Myers.
Who once wanted to lock up people with HIV.
Well, he was interviewed by Joe Nicholson, a gay reporter at the New York Post, and he acknowledged, well, maybe there will have to be quarantine for some people. Front page of the Post, it delayed his appointment for about 6-7 weeks.
We charged out of an ACT UP meeting to Gracie Mansion to go yell at the mayor for appointing him because of this.
And you were right to do so.
It was terrible.
Mayor Dinkins.
In Leawood, Kansas, the town came out to protect a trans elementary school who was being threatened by the Westboro Baptist Church. We have a picture, I think, of the townspeople showing up. Look at that crowd to protect a trans elementary student from the Westboro Baptist Church. The Westboro Baptist Church has been one of the greatest things that happened to us over the years because it really energizes
enemies like that,
people.
who needs friends?
No, they do wonders for us.
And I hope that crowd will make their way down to the Tatum Independent School District in Texas. Now, they have a dress code at this public school that says male hair can't extend below the top of your collar. And a 4-year-old boy had very long... A 4-year-old...
Just looking to see whether you need a haircut. You're doing okay.
All right. A 4-year-old boy shows up with long hair, very long hair. All right. And the Prince superintendent said...
It wasn't that long.
It was pretty long, but all right. The principal said, 4-year-old kid, cut the hair, braid it, or come in a dress, because if you were transgender, it would be okay. And so now the people are saying, wait a minute, this is an outdated, and they say racist, this is an African-American kid thing. So don't let, that may be changed.
In Lodi, California, the Viaggio Estate and Winery has done an about-face. They first rejected the idea of a lesbian wedding being held on their grounds. They rent the place out for weddings, but that was a bridge too far for them. And people complained, and then they said, all right, we'll compromise. You can have the party here, but not the ceremony. The way these people justify and rationalize themselves is ridiculous. But people said, no, 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 that's not good enough. So then they finally fully apologized and invited the couple and other same-sex couples to have their weddings there.
Never mind.
Yeah, we want your money. Your money is more important to us than what we said were our principles.
Some good news in LGBT history. James Baldwin, the author, we have a picture of him. He died back in '87, I think it was. But his home at 137 West 71st Street, where he lived from the mid-'60s to the late '80s, is now on the National Register of Historic Places. Now, he kind of eschewed labels. He wrote about gay relationships. He talked about his homosexuality, especially later in life. But didn't want to be known as a gay writer.
He lived there the last 22 years of his life up until his death and had various family members living in the building too, and briefly, Toni Morrison.
Hi, as my ex-boss Bill Lynch would say, hi cotton.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
And can I mention the award being given to another, a very out gay writer, Edmund White,
yes,
at age 79, is getting an honorary National Book Award, Medal for Distinguished Contribution. It's going to be presented by John Waters.
Wow.
Cute. That will be fun. White, of course, is the legendary author of A Boy's Own Story, the Genet biography. He was a Stonewall vet and a co-founder of GMHC. He also wrote or co-wrote The Joy of Gay Sex and published a lot of his diaries from his days in Paris.
When he found out he had HIV, he said, "It is a red badge of courage in a sex-negative society." All right.
Congratulations.
Speaking of books, it's Banned Books Week is September 22nd to the 28th in the American Library Association's top 10. Well, the #1 book that's banned is something called George by Alex Gino. It has a trans character. It's by a trans author. But if you go down this list, and it includes A Day in the Life of Marlon Bundo, about the gay bunny, for God's sakes, and other books, it's like 70% of the list is LGBT themed.
But there are also things with racial themes that were banned. It's just shocking what gets banned these days. But back to honors, Walt Whitman is being, on the occasion of his 200th birthday, is being honored with a United States Postal Service stamp. It is an 85-cent stamp, which evidently covers letters up to 3 ounces.
The design recalls his poem When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloom, which he wrote about Lincoln when Lincoln was assassinated. He's cited as the father of American poetry, and when they're giving him the stamp, and they said for nursing thousands of sick and dying soldiers in the Civil War.
Did they mention leaves?
He didn't just nurse them; he dated them too.
Did they mention Leaves of Grass?
I didn't read the whole thing. This was what was in the news report.
And the Merriam-Webster Dictionary is adding the non-binary singular usage of they. And, people get upset about this now and argue about it. But for many, many years, when we didn't know someone's gender,
we said they.
We said they. Yeah. We referred to people as they all the time when they were singular people.
Yeah.
In Orlando this last weekend, the ex-gay Pulse survivors, a couple of them and their right-wing friends, held a freedom march. About 100 people showed up.
Well, they tried to turn Sean Cormy in
wait 1 second. Sorry.
Go ahead.
But City Commissioner Patty Sheehan, not the golfer, for those of you in the know, but out lesbian, also out lesbian golfer.
Yeah, right.
Confusing. Right. But she posted a video talking about the attempts at conversion therapy on her and how destructive that was to her. She's an Orlando City Commissioner, so she talked about that.
She was very funny, and then she got very serious about it.
Yeah.
And we would like to include that in our email, maybe. We'll send it to you. If you get on our email list, you go to our website. You can automatically sign up for our weekly email, and we give you web bonuses.
Yes, and we'll have a link to that video on that.
So
Showing
in
court.
Blackwell, Oklahoma, there's this 23-year-old guy who found a partner, and yet he's part of this fundamentalist church, First Assemblies of God, and the family sort of tricked him and the partner into coming to the church.
I wondered about that.
Oh, yes. And then because they said we want to, celebrate something or something, and they grabbed him and they throw him on the floor, and they're speaking in tongues and trying to get rid of the homosexuality and preaching against homosexuality. He went to the police over this, and now he's getting all this pressure, and his family is pressuring, don't pull back on this. And he said, no, there have to be consequences. He said, I love the pastors, but this is not right.
Well, the pastors were preaching against homosexuality, perhaps at the request of the family. I hadn't sorted out whether the family knew what they were dragging these guys into. The church says there's more to the story.
I think it will be safer to go to this Baron von Steuben Day parade, the German-American parade in New York this weekend. I'll be there Saturday. We're going to gather at 70th and between Park and Lex at noon and step off between 1 and 2. We only have to march about 16 blocks, so it's a gay contingent.
I got
stymied. He was gay.
Got stymied by the Mexico Independence Day parade on Madison this weekend, which also was not long, but I was trying to get across and I had to go way around. And Ed Buck in L.A.
I was going to say, we didn't talk about this.
Well, we're about to. Ed Buck is the guy who had been questioned twice because...
Who is Ed Buck? Invariably described to the news stories as a Democratic donor, and he's a gay Democratic donor, older
Major guy in L.A., big Democratic Party connections, but he gets mostly black gay men who are impoverished to come to his house for drugs and sex, and he shoots them up with crystal meth, really against their will for the most part, or too much. He's killed 2 of them and gotten away with it by having it ruled accidental and having it ruled that they were doing it to themselves, when in fact they weren't.
So what happened to another guy who was 37 who suffered an overdose? Now he's charged with 3 counts of battery. He is cited as a dangerous, violent, sexual predator. And he's been implicated in these 2 other deaths.
But I think these are the first charges brought against him.
Well, there were demonstrations outside his home.
Exactly. 3rd time's the charm. They finally prosecute him.
All right.
And congratulations to Altoona, Pennsylvania, which on October 11th, which is National Coming Out Day, will be holding its first Pride Parade.
Did we tell them about the National Trans March?
Oh, no, we did not. September 28th in Washington, D.C., the first National Trans Visibility March coming up. So you may want to check that out.
And London just had their first Trans March. They got about 1,500 people. We do have a picture of it to show you. There were many of them online. People had a great time.
Yep.
They want it to be more in the future.
And I'm sure it will be.
They had a big rally in Soho Square.
But September 28th in D.C., the first Trans Visibility March there. All right. Well, that should segue us into international news.
Yes. Well, we'll start out with actually some good news.
Okay.
In Rwanda. Well, good and bad, but I mean, this well-known gospel singer named Albert Nabonibo, 35 years old, very well-known, he's come out. His friends are freaking out and dissociating themselves from him. He told the Associated Press he came out because I want to live normally.
Oh, good luck with that in Rwanda.
Well, all right. So he's got, a lot of,
backlash.
That's the word. Except from the Minister for Foreign Affairs, who said he is protected by law, and he urged him to continue his worship ministry. And he's a very courageous guy to come out in these circumstances.
Well, more horrors in Edmonton, Canada, which is a more conservative place in the middle of the country. Some far-right crazy creep is targeting the Queer Flex LGBTQ gym, which closed temporarily because he published the names of staff and clients. Yep. And attacked local bloggers over this.
Yep.
Called them Antifa terrorists made up all sorts of stuff?
Similar stuff in Mali, where homophobes are using social media to post pictures of LGBT people. They attack them, they take pictures of them, and then they spread it all over social media so that their families will see it. Now, this is a country where 98% of the people say homosexuality should be rejected. And where are the Facebook monitors? They go after us if we use a bad word sometimes.
Well, they're putting in more protections.
Oh.
In Montego Bay, Jamaica, the mayor has barred the local pride group from meeting at the cultural center, saying it is a sacred building and gay people should not be allowed in it.
Well, Montego Gay Pride there is contemplating legal action over that.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Well, good luck. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, good news from Ukraine, where in the second largest city, Kharkiv, they held their first Pride March. 2,000 people showed up to march. The cops scuffled a little with right-wing protesters, but basically everything went off just fine.
But in Uzbekistan, in Tashkent, we're talking here about the murder of Shokir Shakatan. We have a picture of him, 25 years old, brutally stabbed just days after coming out. He's a 28-year-old.
On Instagram.
A 28-year-old suspect is in custody. One friend said that two men carried him away from a nightclub that has some gay people. His parents had already been harassed by neighbors over their son coming out, and now he's dead.
Well, a warning to the Rwanda guy.
And then Chechnya.
Well, a guy who escaped from Chechnya after being tortured there and is now in Canada, and thanks to the Rainbow Railroad.
His name is Amin Jabrailung.
We try.
We tried.
But he spoke this week about exactly what had happened to him in Chechnya and how he was tortured with electric.
Well, he's a hair colorist. They
went into his salon.
Soldiers.
Yeah.
And they abducted him. And he said it was like near death. 17 men were at this location, all being tortured, all being said, give us other names.
Yep.
And beaten with pipes because the interrogators didn't want to touch them because homosexuality is disgusting.
Yep.
He considered suicide, but he was released for some reason to his family and friends, and then got the hell out of there on the Rainbow Railroad.
In Serbia, in Belgrade, they held their 8th Pride March. Things have been dicey there over the years about their Pride events, but the cops were there to protect them. And marching in the parade were the out lesbian Prime Minister, Anna Brnabić, and her partner, and the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, the out gay
whose name is Javier Bettel. We got a picture of all of them and their partners. They say this is an historic picture, prime ministers and their partners, two of them together. And of course, Bettel there in the white shirt, right? He was the one holding the press conference with Boris Johnson this week, where Boris Johnson wouldn't show up, and he scolded him over all the stuff with Brexit.
And out lesbian Brnabić is the target of a little controversy with the local gay groups that don't think she's helpful enough.
She's a right-winger.
Yeah, because she's a puppet of the right-wing ruling group.
In Japan, a woman was awarded damages after the breakup with her same-sex partner due to the infidelity with their sperm donor. Now they don't have legal recognition of domestic this is legal recognition of a common law partnership, this is a breakthrough.
These two women have been together for many years. They got married in the United States. They came back to Japan. They wanted to have a child, so one of the partners contracted with a sperm donor and became pregnant. Then she had an affair with the sperm donor, and the other partner got upset about this. They separated. The non-birth mother lesbian sued for infidelity. Meanwhile, the sperm donor transitions and is now a trans woman, still with the partner who was unfaithful.
But the wronged woman is getting $10,000.
And the real important part of this story is that the court has recognized the relationship, which is very unusual in Japan.
Well, here's a story in London. They had Waltham Forest Pride within London, and they had this video of a Muslim woman in full hijab heaping abuse on a gay pride guy with a flag on it. But the significance of this is she is being charged with a hate crime just for screaming at him. I mean, that wouldn't happen here.
Certainly not.
She just kept saying, shame on you, and she was arrested for abuse.
Assault.
Just abuse based on sexual orientation, but it was all verbal.
Yeah. In the Czech Republic, hundreds of people showed up in Prague to demonstrate for same-sex marriage rights. The Chamber of Deputies has stalled the plan for marriage for a year. The ruling government is for it. 61% of the people are for it, but it is stalled in the Chamber of Deputies. So we'll see whether this demonstration does any good. But
and 90% want gun control here, but we can't get it through the Senate.
Well, there you go. And also in London, they have these annual concerts called the BBC Proms.
Right.
You might want to explain more what that is. But a U.S.
This is an annual music festival at the Albert Hall.
So one of the big soloists was an American soprano, Jamie Barton, who is an
bisexual.
Well, she calls herself proudly queer opera singer into sci-fi, drag queens, bluegrass, social justice, equality, and Cats, the musical. Also refers to herself as a queer girl with a nose ring. So she concludes the concert by picking up a rainbow flag.
Everybody else has got Union Jacks.
Show that picture again.
Everybody else has got Union Jacks and those England flags.
And she starts waving around as they're singing Rule Britannia to close the concert.
It is the finale, and but as somebody pointed out in The Guardian, Rule Britannia is what spread homophobia around the world.
Well, more or less.
All right.
And then the sort of heartwarming and poignant story of the week is Welsh rugby star Gareth Thomas. He came out some years ago as gay, and now he has posted a video on YouTube, on his Twitter account.
He was being blackmailed.
Yeah,
so
threatened with blackmail.
Threatened with blackmail, so he decided to come out about having HIV. He came out as gay in 2009. He was a victim of hate crime in Cardiff last November, but he urged the police to deal with the 16-year-old assailant with restorative justice. His husband, Stephen, is HIV negative, but here is Gareth's statement to us.
Hello, I'm Gareth Thomas, and I want to share my secret with you. Why? Because it's mine to tell you. Not the evils that make my life hell threatening to tell you before I do. And because I believe in you and I trust you. I'm living with HIV. Now you have that information, that makes me extremely vulnerable, but it does not make me weak. Now, even though I've been forced to tell you this, I choose to fight, to educate and break the stigma around this subject. And that begins today, when I take on the toughest Ironman in the world in Tenby, and I push myself physically to the limits. I'm asking you to help me to show that everyone lives in fear of people's reactions and opinions to something about them, but that doesn't mean that we should have to hide. But to do this, I really, really need your support.
You've got it, Gareth. Very courageous.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad to me that in this day and age, someone should have to be so scared about coming out about it.
Most people who contract HIV now, they don't really have to talk about it because they can maintain their health and they don't want to be defined by the disease. I mean,
and he is taking medication and he's undetectable.
I mean, you know, Corey Johnson is out about having HIV.
Yes.
He's running for mayor now.
Yeah.
But he took 9 years to decide whether to disclose that to everybody.
Yeah, but he came out quite a while ago.
Yeah.
So
when he ran for council.
Anyway, Gareth Thomas is 45 and in good shape, and he ran an Ironman triathlon.
One of our big supporters, Phyllis Newman, died this week at the age of 86. She beat Barbra Streisand for the Tony back in 1962, But her lasting legacy, she was a 30-year breast cancer survivor. She founded the Phyllis Newman Women's Health Initiative of the Actors Fund, which was created by a grant from our friends at Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, which still maintains it with almost $1 million a year. So we will miss her, but her work will go on. And the Broadway Cares Flea Market and Auction in what is it called?
The Schubert Alley.
Schubert Alley is this Sunday from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m.
God bless Broadway Cares. They continue to do great work.
Yeah.
And great work to some extent going on in San Francisco, which just reported figures from 2018, just 197 new HIV cases last year. But while they are declining overall, they are still rising.
Yes.
Among Black, Latinx people and homeless people and IV drug users.
Watch on. Entertainment news.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, should we talk about the Saturday Night Live controversy?
Sure. Well, so they hired their first Asian cast member, and he's also gay. And
Bowen Yang.
Yeah, and that's very exciting. And they hired two other people, and one of them was Shane Gillis, who's famous for cheap homophobic and racist jokes. We have a picture of him. This is with...
he's on the left.
Yeah, he's on the left, and the guy on the right is...
Chris Gethard.
Who he called a white faggot comic. He just makes crude remarks like this and thinks they're funny. And I watched his anti-Asian stuff, and it's all just, it's all just stereotypes and stupidity.
And he talks about, well, I take risks. And it doesn't always work. Take risks. You're just a hateful, horrible person.
It's lazy. And of course, I bet Andrew Yang, the presidential candidate, who's Asian American, is regretting forgiving him so quickly when this story came up.
I don't know. He said, I'd be happy to talk to you. And Shane Gillis said, okay. And so now they're getting together. And Yang doesn't seem so regretful about that. We'll see where it ends up. But
all right.
Really, the fact that these guys...
Saturday Night Live had to admit, our vetting process was not followed.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether they got caught or what.
Well, they got caught.
So
it's so easy to do research these days. You go to Google.
Just to go on YouTube and look at these people. So now NBC has hired a new SNL is NBC, and now NBC for its late night lineup has hired Lily Singh, an out bisexual comedian.
We have a picture of her.
Indian extraction, 30 years old. She replaces Carson Daly at 1:30 a.m. and the show is a little late with Lily Singh. So I watched the first episode. I don't think that's a good indication. It wasn't very funny.
Oh, okay.
So I'm hoping she warms up and gets more into her routine. As we're taping on Wednesday, NBC is doing a 10 p.m. hour special with her to try to draw people in. I certainly want her to be a big success and to be really good. I wasn't impressed by the first look, but she's evidently a big YouTube star.
Don't do anything desperate like having Shane Gillis on.
No, don't do that.
Hey, the creative Emmys were handed out.
Yeah.
There were a lot for Queer Eye and RuPaul's Drag Show and Hannah Gadsby.
Drag Race.
I know,
Yeah, I know.
Sorry, this is okay.
That's all right.
All right.
And a couple of other things coming up. The CW network, starting October 7th, is running a show called All American, which is kind of a football milieu. But the best friend of the football star is a black butch lesbian played by Breezy. What did I watch Breezy in? Breezy was good in something else. I'll have to look it up. But to have a black butch lesbian character is unusual in a primetime network show, even if it is the CW.
I want to see the picture of the blondes on Bachelor.
Okay.
Tell us about this.
Bachelor in Paradise. This is the thing we told you about a few weeks ago, where there was a bisexual contestant who said she'd been dating a woman off screen, so they brought the woman onto the show, even though she had no previous connection with The Bachelor, which is the requirement for Bachelor in Paradise, which is a summer show where they bring in losing contestants from The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. Put them back up. We want to see more of
Yeah,
them.
leave that on.
So,
Come on.
the big finale of Bachelor in Paradise is these two got engaged. One of them proposed to the other, and they are now engaged. And then they did an after-show thing, and the other one proposed to the first one.
Can't Alliance Defending Freedom do something about this and maybe demand trigger warnings?
Christian Haggerty on the left and Demi Burnett on the right. Oh, we've lost them again. But congratulations to them. Let's hope their relationship lasts more than most Bachelor-related relationships.
They once were lost, but now they're found.
Well, I didn't watch any of this because I really cannot watch another minute of any of the Bachelor shows, but I gave that up years ago. But I was thrilled to see that this is where they're moving. It's the cultural thing you talked about. We are winning the culture wars.
That's right.
All right, next.
Mrs. Fletcher, what's that?
Oh, Mrs. Fletcher is an upcoming HBO show. It's coming in October. Catherine Hahn as a single mom. But it's a lot about her real and fantasy sex life, and a lot of it includes her relationships with women. So she's described as having sexual adventures. So for all you Gentleman Jack fans, this could be an interesting new
check it out.
Thing to watch.
And I want to check out on Netflix a new Ryan Murphy thing called The Politicians, starting September 27th. It's Ben Platt of Dear Evan Hansen. I don't have a picture, but you know him. He's an aspiring gay politician at this point at St. Sebastian High School, and Gwyneth Paltrow plays his mom. It's a comedy.
Another documentary opening this weekend in New York and next weekend in LA. This is the one I was thinking of, called Don't Be Nice. It has a lot of queer content. It's about the Bowery Poetry Slam performers, and it's really quite compelling and very deep and thoughtful and fun and energetic. Don't Be Nice is a very interesting documentary. It's about them trying to write the truth and not get lazy about their themes for competition, and where it takes them, and it's interesting.
So CBS has canceled the Alan Cumming detective series Instinct, starring him, and due to low ratings. So there's a big campaign to save it. It's online. We will include that link in our email if you want to try to save Instinct.
And another headline, singer Sam Smith, you remember his huge hit Stay With Me, came out as gay some years ago, is now coming out as non-binary and using they, them pronouns. Actually, I think he'd come out as non-binary before, but made a big announcement about I'm now using they, them pronouns. So congratulations to Sam.
Rupert Everett, who is openly gay, is going to co-star in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf on Broadway in March with Laurie Metcalf. And in the press release, they include the 1962 reviews, some of which describing it as basically pure filth.
I always loved it. And we have a start date for the reboot of the L Word, Generation Q, December 8th on Showtime, bringing back Jennifer Beals, Leisha Haley, Kate Manning. 8 episodes starting December 8th. Set your DVR and set it for us. We'll be back next week.
We will, if we, well.
If we something. All right, we'll see you then. Bye.